This is Scott Spears, and today we delve into the biggest conspiracy theory in the history of the world, the JFK assassination. Former CIA agent E. Howard Hunt, in a Deathbed Confession, has given us a key to this decades-old saga. E. Howard Hunt died in 2007. Joining us today is his son, St. John Hunt. St. John, how are you?
I am doing very well, Scott. Thank you for having me on your show. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you. I know we've tried to get this going for quite a while, but I'm glad to be here today and share my story with you and your listeners.
Well, I gotta tell you, I'm so glad you're here because this is such a fascinating story to so many people, and I don't know how many people understand that just recently this part of the story has come out. Let's start like this. For people who don't know, who was your father, E. Howard Hunt?
My father, E. Howard Hunt, was a 27-year career covert operative for the Central Intelligence Agency. He joined the predecessor of the CIA, which some of your listeners might know was the OSS back at the end of World War II. The OSS stood for the Office of Strategic Services, and it was modeled very closely to the British MI5, which was their covert branch of government. Up until that time, the United States did not have a covert branch to the government or the military. So my father, after the OSS disbanded, shortly after World War II, the same gentlemen, I will call them, that were the leaders of OSS, were mandated by presidential order to start a covert operations unit here in the United States for gathering of intelligence, which really was the start of the Cold War, and that's still going on today. My father was one of the original members of both OSS and the CIA. He worked as head of psychological warfare operations. He rose to be second chief of the Latin American Bureau. Some of his most infamous missions were the overthrow of the Guatemalan government of Jacob Arbenz in 1954, I believe it was. That was a very successful operation. They modeled the invasion of Cuba, the Bay of Pigs, after that model, and as we all know through history, that just didn't work out the way the CIA wanted to, blaming, of course, the President Kennedy and his brother Robert for a last-minute decision to withdraw the air support that had been promised to the mercenaries, which were ex-Cuban patriots who fled the Castro regime. Anyways, my dad was in charge of that. He was also team leader to put together the government in exile that was to be declared the de facto government once Castro was assassinated. He was also the first CIA officer to officially request the assassination of Fidel Castro. And so he was also one of the leaders of an off-the-shelf secret team called Operation 40, or sometimes referred to as Group 40. They were the Executive Action Committee, which then Vice President Nixon was the liaison between the Operation 40 group and the White House. And their mandate was to liquidate foreign leaders who were unfriendly to the United States, whether it was the president, a dictator, some lower government official, an embassy official perhaps, someone in any league of their government, even press, even press correspondents of foreign countries. And so they had assembled a couple of crack teams to go worldwide and take care of the dirty business. And in 1970, my father retired from the CIA and was then asked by President Nixon's chief counsel, Charles Colson, to head up a secret team in the White House, which became known as the Plumbers. My father and G. Gordon Liddy were the top operatives in this group, and they had a crew of men, some of whom were Bay of Pigs exile mercenaries, and some were ex-FBI, ex-ATF, people like that. And that culminated, of course, in the Watergate break-in in 1972, where the break-in team was discovered on the floor of the Watergate apartment and office complex in Washington, D.C., and subsequently arrested. And then some of the information that they had on their person was traced back to my father, and subsequently he had to turn himself in and was duly sentenced at the end of a long litigation trial to 4.5 years in the federal penitentiary, which he served, and that was basically the end of his covert career. But he was a man who really was the link, the thread, if I can use that term. He was the thread that linked almost the entire his generation's entire covert activities up until the Vietnam War, starting with Guatemala, even before that Iran, Guatemala, Cuba, political assassinations, Watergate, and then many people have thought throughout the years that he was a co-conspirator in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. My father never admitted to that. In his long career, he lived to be about 85, and was brought before two congressional committees, the Rockefeller and the Church Committee, in the 70s, to testify about his knowledge of any executive action, including the assassination of John F. Kennedy, which he claimed testified under oath that he had no knowledge, no prior knowledge, didn't know anybody that was connected to it, and just had no information to offer to the Senate or the Congress about it.
Which kind of brings us here. So basically we know about E. Howard Hunt. I think our history buffs out there are going to remember him from Watergate, but he was an inside guy in the CIA, so if anybody had information or could have gotten to it, E. Howard Hunt was definitely creditable.
Well, he was very credible, and one of the reasons why was because he was the kind of operative who, in the, let's say, the first half of any given day, he would be right out in the field in the guerrilla training camps in El Salvador, training, or in the Everglades swamps in Florida, training the Cuban exiles for the invasion of Cuba, and then later on he would put on his Brooks Brothers suit and a tie and have lunch with the director of the CIA, Dick Helms. He was a close friend of all the real big officers at the CIA, but yet at the same time he was very, very highly respected in the Cuban exile community, and he was in touch with all of their leaders, and as I said before, the assassination, the assassins who worked in this off-the-shelf covert group called Operation 40, and so he was kind of the guy that could lay his finger on any area of the intelligence community and get things done, bring people together, review, discuss things, give his approval or disapproval on any particular operation of any type.
Now, St. John, how did it come about? You said your father testified under oath before two commissions that he knew nothing about the JFK assassination. Obviously, he gave a deathbed confession to the contrary. How did it come about that he was going to give that confession?
Well, here's what happened. As my father well knew, and as a matter of fact, he had defended himself in a libel case, and Mark Lane was the prosecuting attorney. Mark Lane's a very well-known New York and respected assassination researcher. He's written several books on the assassination. One of the earliest giants of literature to call into question the Warren Commission Well, down through the years, my father's name had been mentioned as a possible conspirator. There had been some photographs that surfaced showing some men that were rounded up the afternoon of the assassination, and one of them looked very, very similarly to my father. Of course, he had always denied these things, but in 2003. My father had already been suffering a couple of years of very poor health. He had quite a considerable medical problems, and was faced with the prospect of probably only living a few more months. If he had a gangrenous leg, and he was not going to allow the amputation, and so he called me down to Miami and said, I probably don't have much longer to live, and so there's some things that I need to discuss with you, and you alone. And so that started the whole thing. I mean, in the back of my mind, I kind of felt that if anybody in the CIA was involved in the assassination of JFK, either my father would have been, or certainly knew who was involved. He was a well-known Kennedy hater. He blamed JFK and RFK for the failure of the Bay of Pigs. Many of my father's closest comrades in arms and allies were rounded up by Castro and spent 18 months in the most deplorable, inhumane conditions in Cuba until President Kennedy ransomed them for medical aid and money. So he had the means and the motives. Certainly, he was ready to get something big off his chest, and he and I had very unique relationships. Although we were politically on opposite sides of the fence, we had built up what I call a bond of secrecy, a bond of trust, dating as far back as Watergate, when I helped him destroy physical evidence on several occasions and transport huge sums of cash from secret locations to other secret locations to help him in the weeks following his arrest, the arrest of his team at the Watergate. So I'm down in Florida, and he's in the hospital, and he started telling me that my fears were, his fears, I should say, were that although he wasn't the person that, in fact, pulled the trigger on JFK. He did, in fact, have a good deal of information about who was involved, where the orders came from, and who was one of the shooters in Dealey Plaza that day. Over the course of the next 2 weeks, while I was still visiting Miami, he was transferred back to his home there, and I spent a lot of time with him bedside as he unfolded this incredible story to me, and I took some notes, but then I left. I had to leave, and he ended up living a few more years, but I went back in 2005 to try to prompt him to bring the story out, and he was at that point, I think his main concerns were to protect his family from any future or further ill notoriety from the press. He had remarried and had several new children, and he didn't want his disdain of what he did in his earlier life to come back and deal a blow to them. As he reminded me so many times, he said, "You remember during Watergate how it destroyed our family," which in fact it did. Your mother died during it. The press were camped out on our front lawn. He goes, "I just cannot do that to this family. And if I came out with this information while I was alive, of course, that's exactly what would happen." And not only that, he was worried about being arrested for a co-conspirator to the JFK assassination. There's no statute of limitations on withholding evidence from Congress or the Senate regarding a presidential assassination, and so there was a lot of legal ramifications and personal family issues that he wrestled with, and in the end he decided the best thing he could do was give me the information and swear me to the oath that after he passed away, I was to bring this information to light. Because, in all honesty, Scott, my father was rather proud of his role in the assassination. He really did truly feel that Kennedy was a danger to national security, a danger to this country, and he was adamant about that. He felt it was the right thing was done to have Kennedy removed and Johnson put in. Although he loathed Lyndon Johnson because he knew what a treacherous, murderous, conniving and power-mad person Johnson was. But he felt Johnson would at least go along with the status quo, whereas Kennedy was going to buck all that, starting with the withdrawal of 1,000 troops in December of 1963, had he lived through that. So he told me an amazing story, and that's how it all happened. He thought he was, imminently about to pass away, and he needed to get this stuff off his chest. Then things settled down, and when I went back to see him in 2005, 2 years later, he swore me to silence until after he passed away, which was 2 more years after that.
St. John here. Let's take a break and let's listen to your father, E. Howard Hunt, part of the confession to the assassination of JFK.
Okay.
I heard from Frank that LBJ had designated Cord Meyer Jr. to undertake a larger organization while keeping it totally secret. Cord Meyer himself was a rather favored member of the Eastern aristocracy. He was a graduate of Yale University and had joined the Marine Corps during the war and lost an eye in the Pacific fighting. I think that LBJ settled on Meyer as an opportunist, Perrin like himself, Perrin, and a man who had very little left to him in life ever since JFK had taken Cord's wife as one of his mistresses. I would suggest that Cord Meyer welcomed the approach from LBJ, who was, after all, only the vice president at that time. And, of course, could not number Cord Meyer among JFK's admirers. Quite the contrary. As for Dave Phelps, I knew him pretty well at one time. He worked for me during the Guatemala project. He made himself useful to the agency in Santiago, Chile, where he was an American businessman. In any case, his actions, whatever they were, changes the attention of the Santiago station chief. And when his resume became known to people in the Western Hemisphere Division, he was brought in to work on Guatemalan operations. Sturgis and Morales and people of that ilk stayed in apartment houses during the preparations for the big event. And their addresses were very subject to change, so that quite a fellow like Morales had been one day, he was not necessarily associated with that same address the following day. In short, it was a very mobile experience. Let me point out at this point that if I had wanted to fictionalize what went on in Miami and elsewhere during the run-up for the big event, I would have done so. But I don't want any unreality to tinge this particular story, or the information, I should say. I was a bench warmer on it, and I had a reputation for honesty. I think it's essential to refocus on what this information that I've been providing you and you alone, by the way, consists of. What is important in the story is that we've backtracked the chain of command up through Cordmeyer and laying the doings at the doorstep of LBJ. He, in my opinion, had an almost maniacal urge to become president. He regarded JFK as he was, in fact, an obstacle to achieving that. He could have waited for JFK to finish out his term and then undoubtedly a second term. So that would have put LBJ at the head of a long list of people who were waiting for some change in the executive branch.
Okay, now St. John, he mentions a lot there Cordmeyer. Who is Cordmeyer?
Cordmeyer, very interesting fellow. Cordmeyer was station chief in the London office. He was also the liaison between the London underworld, and he had a personal hatred for JFK because Cord's wife was a Philadelphia socialite named Mary Myers, who was having an ongoing affair with JFK, and it's well known now that she and JFK actually sampled LSD several times, and Mary Myers was friends with Tim Leary and that whole crowd, and Cord never really forgave JFK or Mary Myers for being unfaithful, and of course Cord knew well that JFK had many mistresses, one of whom was Marilyn Monroe, and Sam Giancana's mistress, I forget what her name was, but you know, he didn't really have respect for women, and he felt that Mary had not only disgraced him personally but professionally, and just become one of JFK's many mistresses, and that was very dishonorable to him.
Now the two main names that your father mentions in that little audio clip we played there, Cordmeyer, and he says Lyndon Johnson had almost a maniacal interest in becoming president. Now, he doesn't say in the audio clip that we heard who this is, and I think that's the question. Who pulled the trigger? Was it Lee Harvey Oswald? Was it somebody dispatched by Lyndon Johnson? What did Cordmeyer play in this? We've all been waiting for years to know this. So, to the best of your father's knowledge, to the best of your knowledge, who set this up?
Well, it was set up by the powers that be. Number one, the military chiefs of staff in the military were deeply disturbed by Kennedy's withdrawing the troops and having the United States back out of the Vietnam War. The financial powers that be were deeply disturbed that Kennedy was going to abolish the Federal Reserve and bring us back to the gold standard. And Lyndon Johnson was, as my father described him, was just maniacally hungry to become the president. Now, he realized that to have John F. Kennedy reelected for a second term would have put him out of the picture for another 4 years, and at which time he didn't really feel confident that a man of Lyndon's age at the time was really going to win the nomination of his party and win the election. So there was a lot of fear in Johnson that he could not on his own legally win the election, and he had been an old hand at stacking the votes and doing all kinds of shenanigans as far back as in the 40s when he entered politics in Texas. There's been many books written about the scandalous things that he did, including apparently having certain individuals murdered and silenced so that he could proceed with his grab for power. So being nominated by JFK as his vice president put him about as close as he was ever going to get to President of the United States. Now, it was okay with Johnson that Kennedy be removed. That worked out through the CIA connections, who were also bitterly resentful and hateful of JFK. After the Bay of Pigs, Kennedy swore to splinter the CIA to 1,000 pieces, and in fact, many of the top CIA officials were demoted and sent to far-off posts, basically ruining their career. But there was a strong cadre of CIA men who were still in control of the underground CIA, that is the off-the-shelf people, as my father was involved with Operation 40. So it was just the fact of using some of these same people. Harvey, what was his name? Bill Harvey was the CIA station chief in Rome, and his connections were with the French and Italian underworld. He had already been running his end of Operation 40 in that part of Europe. So he had the connections to hire a French, very well-known French assassin named Lucien Sarté, who was then brought in to the country to be part of the assassination team. This is according to my father, at Dealey Plaza that day. So, the conspiracy didn't really have to be that large. You had Johnson, all he really did was wink his eye and give the go-ahead. He didn't want to know any of the details, but you had the main planning done by people like Cordmeyer and Bill Harvey and David Atlee Phillips, who were kind of the overseers of this group of assassins that had been running around and taking care of that kind of those kind of hits and things. Then you have to have the approval of the FBI, of course, and it's well known that J. Edgar Hoover, lifelong head of the FBI, was due to retire, as the law was,